Welcome to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lotta and I'll be your lovely host today. Now we are in the middle of a heat wave and I love coffee. So in today's video, I want to show you some of my favorite iced coffee recipes that I drink all the time. Tiny disclaimer before we get started, I am by no means a coffee expert, especially when it comes to our espresso machine. I don't know the right amount of ground coffee beans to the perfect shot of espresso ratio or the science behind the pressure or any of that, so don't come at me for that. But that being said, if you do have any tips or tricks that will elevate my coffee experience, do let me know. Okay, that being said, let's get started with our first coffee. Now the first recipe that I want to show you is my all-time favorite. I think I drink this every single morning, or at least once a day, and that is a iced caramel macchiato or iced caramel latte. I don't really know what the difference is. All I know is it tastes good. Okay. Now for this coffee, we're going to start off with a nice big glass filled with ice, and I'm going to fill about halfway with milk. That should be good. Now for the caramel part, I have this caramel syrup. So I'm just going to add one of those. If you like your coffee a little more sweet, you can always add a little bit more. I kind of like it being a little bit more bitter and having more of the coffee flavor. So I try to add not too much of the syrup. I think that was probably like a teaspoon, maybe. Actually, I'm gonna add a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Now for the actual coffee part, we're going to have to go to our lovely espresso machine and extract a double shot of espresso to pour on top. All we have to do is add A and B together, give it a mix, and enjoy our coffee. Now, if you want to be extra fancy when you pour your espresso over your milk, if you pour it over the back of a spoon, it'll kind of help it to layer, and it'll just look kind of cool. But in the end, you're just going to mix it around anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much. So this next recipe is a brown sugar shaken espresso. So obviously we're going to need some milk, any milk works. We're also going to need a splash of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of brown sugar with a pinch of cinnamon, our glass that is filled with ice, and our double shot of espresso. Now I'm going to start by adding my vanilla, brown sugar, cinnamon, and espresso into my shaker. You could also use a mason jar if you prefer. And I'm going to just give that one mix to make sure that the brown sugar dissolves before we start shaking. Now I'm going to shake this with about half of my ice just to make sure that the espresso cools down as well. shake your espresso for 1 or 2 minutes to make sure that it gets super fluffy and airy. Now all we have to do is pour this into our glass and then top it up with some of our milk. This one almost tastes a little bit like fall or Christmas, but because it's iced, it's very refreshing. I really like this one. Now for this next coffee recipe, we're going to be making cold brew. So cold brew does take a while to make, but it's definitely worth it. So I want to make around 2 cups of cold brew, so I'm going to use 2 cups or 500 milliliters of regular cold filtered water, and then 2 ounces or 56 grams of coffee beans. Now I'm using a 1-to-1 ratio, but you could just as easily do a 2-to-1 ratio depending on how you want your cold brew to be in the end. Now the first thing I need to do is just grind up my coffee beans and then we can move on. Now you could use any container to make your cold brew. I'm going to use a French press, but you could just as easily use a mason jar as well. So basically all we have to do is add our coffee grounds and our water and give it one good mix together. Now we just have to be patient and let this sit and do its thing for at least 12 to 18 hours, but even up to 24 hours. So again, you can leave this either on your counter or you could put it into the fridge. It doesn't really make too much of a difference. If you want your cold brew to be cold as soon as you want to drink it the next day, I would suggest putting it into the fridge already. But if you don't really care about it that much, then you can let it sit on your counter at room temperature for those 18 to 24 hours, but that's totally up to you. Now, if you're using a French press like me, just make sure not to push the coffee grounds down. You don't want to do that until the next day. So I'll see you in 24 hours. It's the next day and we can finally finish our cold brew. So I'm just going to start by French pressing it to get all of my coffee grounds to the bottom. Now to get out any other murkiness that's inside of our cold brew, I'm going to filter it through a coffee filter and a fine mesh sieve and then just collect it in my bowl here. Now to top the cold brew, I want to make a sweet vanilla frothed milk. So I have a frother that has a cold option. If you don't have that, you could always whip it up with a whisk or shake it in a mason jar as well. So for the foam, I used half a cup of milk, 1 teaspoon of powdered sugar, and a good splash of vanilla. So now we can basically just put it all together. I have my 2 glasses that I filled with ice, and I'm just gonna pour in my cold brew and then cover it with my sweet milk. coffee recipe I want to share with you guys is a Dalgona whipped coffee. So for that, you're going to need 2 teaspoons of instant espresso, 1 teaspoon of sugar, depending on how sweet you want your coffee to be, and then 500 milliliters or just like a good splash of water. And of course, you're going to need your tall glass filled with ice and milk. All we have to do to this coffee is add it all into a nice bowl and whisk it for a good couple of minutes until it's super fluffy. And there's your whipped coffee, easy peasy, and it doesn't take long at all. Another really good thing is adding a scoop of ice cream into your milk before you mix it in. Really good. Now, I don't know if this next recipe even counts as an iced coffee. I think it's more like a dessert almost, but it's an affogato, which is basically espresso over ice cream. And it's delicious, especially when it's super, super hot outside and you want a coffee, but you also kind of want ice cream and a dessert. It's the best of both worlds. So the first thing we need to do is basically get ourselves a good shot of espresso, and then we're just going to fill our cup, bowl, glass, whatever, with some ice cream and pour our coffee over it. That's just perfect. You get like the sweetness from the ice cream, but the bitterness from the coffee. It's just great. You just kind of have to eat it a little bit fast because else all your ice cream is gonna melt. But at least then you have a good iced coffee.